I give a fuck? Why do I give a fuck? Why do I try so hard? Why do I care so much?
Welcome to Why Do I Give a Fuck? A cross-cultural conversation between myself, Diane Tate,
and Johanna Thompson. In these times of great struggle and possible shift, we ask ourselves,
why do we give a fuck about any of it? How does the lens we see the world through impact what we see?
And what do we do about it?
We're really talking about how people are communicating in what spaces there's a lot of engagement and TikTok. And I was saying to Diane, I was just like, have you started to look at what's happening in the comment sections of our podcast? And so we welcome and invite everyone to go onto TikTok because we're there on TikTok. And folks are beginning to comment, and the comments are getting real testy, real feisty out there.
A bit.
And, my skin is thick because I come from being raised a Black woman in the United States. So I have real thick skin and folks can come at. And so, but I am always interested in how people are commenting and what people's responsiveness is to what we're saying. And also seeing that the engagement that's happening on TikTok, it's the thing, we had the Facebook, the YouTube iteration in there, and then we have like the Instagram and now TikTok. And it also is speaking to how people's attention span is getting so much shorter and shorter by the moment as there's so much going on in the world, right? So like the bits and pieces that you're taking and you're grabbing and that you're catching on TikTok is what is informing how you are existing in the space. And that's like a really scary thing because I have a lot of people around me, and actually on the island, a lot of people are on TikTok. So you're also, and a majority of the stuff on the island that you see about the United States is bananas. And when I say bananas, you hear about most recently, one of the things is an incident of a woman who was driving babies around in her car, and when the police pulled the car over and opened up the trunk, the babies had been in the trunk and had maggots all over them. Yeah, this woman.
That's in Jamaica or the U.S.?
No, in the U.S. So what I'm saying is that the way that the social media goes is like you can be on a different continent and hearing about the wild and craziness more. You don't hear about the pleasantries of the United States on TikTok, right? You hear about all of the horrors of what's going on.
Well, because that's the nature of social media. That gets the
because it's your algorithm, but it's
right.
Also creating very intentional nationalism, right? Which is because the communication on the U.S. is you people are crazy.
We are.
You have a lot of problems. It's a very negative narrative about what's going on in the United States because you're getting a specific and intentional communication about what's happening in that space. And that then does create this nationalism and more separation amongst people, more tribalism that we're moving into. And tribalism in the context of the structures of capitalism is going to create a different shift, because then capitalism is going to have to figure out a way to untribalize those of us who are coming together and building together. You know what I mean? And like starting to fight against what capitalism does not provide for these specific tribes and communities that are like developing. So it's a very interesting thing and a very interesting shift that I'm curious to see what is going to come to the end. And then I also will continue to say, I think that there's going to be a universality of tribalism that comes as technology continues to tell us how we are destroying ourselves.
So you mean technology getting more information of how our actions on this earth are destroying the earth. Okay.
Ourselves and our social relations. Yeah. So like, I know that I believe that we spoke about, there was a video that was going around on all of the socials where white identified human beings were mad because ChatGPT was asked the question of like, if you came back as any type of human, what would be the best human to come back as? And then ChatGPT went through this big, long iteration, was like, I would only want to come back as a black as a Black person because they've gone through this and that and this and this and still resilient and still producing this and still creating this and still doing this. And so so folks that heard that and saw that that was being regurgitated through what we are looking at as the aggregate of our data and information in this moment, and we're really very upset about that. But technology is going to continue to tell us the truth of the information on our algorithms that is able to gather about what it is that we're doing with each other. And that doesn't support the structure of capitalism that needs us to be in separation in a way to be able to control and manage how it sources resources to us.
That's such an interesting concept. That's such an interesting concept that it's like when I think of tribalism, as you were first bringing that term into the conversation, when I think of tribalism, I think of separation. I think of my first concept of tribalism is, I'm part of my tribe and I'm going to fight you. I don't like to use the word tribe. I wish I had a different, because I always think of that being appropriated, but it's interesting to think of the concept of creating groups of people who can support each other to fight against the capitalistic society that we are all suffering and dying under, some of us slowly, some of us quickly. And yeah, I'd have to switch that in my brain because I think of my concept of tribalism denotes a negativity.
Let me clarify, because I was speaking about it in 2 points. It's like, yes, there is this kind of nationalism and this tribalism that is being created. And then I'm saying, as we continue to iterate through the advancement of technology, that there's going to be a human tribalism that comes together within these little sects, because now we are going to be engaging with something that's outside of human, that is information and speaking to our destruction. And those different iterations of tribalism in the context of the structures of capitalism and white supremacy is going to be much more difficult. As they're seeing, it's much more difficult now. Like, get people to go along and to usher them in, unless you tell them all to stay in their house and not talk to anybody,
Right.
like we did, during COVID,
During COVID, yeah.
Or if you're taking away resources so people don't have access to be able to engage, trying to like completely get rid of a TikTok, or trying to make sure that there was less privileges to engage on Instagram and all of those type of things, shadow ban, all of the things that are happening when people don't have control of the information to keep the structures of capitalism going and moving forward.
Right. You just said a whole mouthful. I think it's so. I mean, do you have conversations with people, going back to what you were saying about the what's going out into the world, about what's happening in the US is painting such a negative picture, which, I would argue is a true picture, but certainly negative. I'm curious if you engage in conversation with other folks on the island that you're on, in Jamaica, about the US, and does anybody ever ask you why you moved there, or they just...
That's my responsiveness when they're actually speaking about how crazy and horrible the United States is, right? I'm like, well, for me in particular, that's why I left, because within this institutions and the structure of the United States, existing as a Black woman there, I am the lowest person on the totem pole. I'm the least valued, and I have a different value experience here on the island as well, right? Because I'm a woman, and the masculine and the feminine here is very traditionalist cultured, is the way that I want to say it. Women have their place and men do their place. And so being somebody from the United States, raised in the United States, but with Jamaican ethnicity, so understanding like the hot bloodedness of that runs through our veins. But I say this because I had an experience yesterday where somebody was in the house coming to fix the electrical, and I'm just going to go into some personalization of it because I think it's the best explanation. But coming to fix the electrical, I had 4 men that were standing around me and like doing what I have observed men to do, like having this conversation about what could be a problem, what could be wrong, and not even in consideration that I would have any clue about a plumbing, about a water heater, about a wire, with a switch. And so I'm just like, well, it could possibly be that the coil in the water heater has blown out. And
Mm.
also because y'all just did some work with the plumbing, that if the coil is blown out and the water machine is not operating properly, then it is not going to pump the hot water through the pipes to the other side of the house.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a silence, and it was a pause, and the technician, the specialist, the actual electrical technician, he looked at me and he was like, this woman knows what she's talking about. And the men were just like, oh, like literally, the other ones are like, oh, do you know what I'm saying? So you can, my point in saying that, right, is just like, yes, being the lowest person on the totem pole in the United States, and like going back to seriousness, being Black identified, but then also being female identified, and the devaluing of what you bring to the table in that. Here on the island, being female identifying and devaluing what you bring within the structures and the hierarchy of when you're speaking about white males being at the top of the capitalistic structure that is able to make decisions for how everybody else exists under their comfort.
Right.
Not the people's comfort that are existing, but existing under white male comfort.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are a person that lives in that experience, you can speak to being female identified under that, and like what, could have looked, your family situation as you were coming up could have looked like, and what the devaluing of that, and how much when we are in a position of being marginalized, how much you have to spend most of your life pushing back.
Mm-hmm.
To just exist peacefully in your freedom and be left alone.
Yeah. Yeah. I know you are an incredibly strong and independent woman, so I'm curious how that is for you being. You're not?
Oh, I'm so
You're
troubled.
not?
Oh no, I am. No, I'm
Oh.
saying it. Oh, I'm just saying it now. Work here. I'm considered a difficult and troublesome woman here.
Oh, we talked about that in the last episode. Troublesome.
Difficult and thoroughly troublesome woman. I too much trouble. And it's so funny, that same electrician, as he was leaving, we had a moment outside where it was just he and I outside. He was just like, he's like, I really like you. You don't let no man trouble you. Don't let no man trouble you. And he was like, that's how I would want my daughters to be raised, because the pushback and the fight back, and I know you're gonna actually you're gonna hear me, and that speaks to a Cambodia, it speaks to a Palestine, it speaks to a female identified person in the United States. You are going to hear me and see me because I bring value. Without me, I'm a part of the ecosystem of value.
Right.
And capitalism does speak to the value of people, but within a suppressed and like slave type of system.
Right. And
So,
only based on what they can bring to further the capitalistic, the system, it's that makes me think of something else Gaza related, that there are 4 countries that have now said that they would recognize Palestine as a state in September if
Mhm.
if we don't do something about the forced starvation that's happening in the region. And they think they've said something, they think they're standing on this. It's a threat. It's a threat to the US. It's a threat to Israel. It's a threat to, if you don't start letting the aid in to stop the forced starvation and to try to minimize the harm, although I'm not even sure. I think we've already crossed the threshold of which, even if they let the aid in, the humans that have been there and that might still be alive, their bodies have been so drastically changed that I'm not even sure the food is actually going to fix the problem. But, they're standing on this and saying, we're going to recognize Palestine as a state within the United Nations in September if you don't let the aid in. and they think they've said something, and it's like, why aren't you recognizing Palestine as a state just based on the fact that it's a friggin' state, and it's been on every map for millennia, and as Palestine. And so yeah, it just speaks to that. It's like it's that narrow vision of I'm telling you that you have value, and it's like, okay, but I've had value all along. Just because you just figured this shit out does not mean that all of a sudden I have fucking value.
For real. Seriously, like when people start to realize that I don't understand when people are trying to attribute value to someone else. Just check in with your own value.
Yeah.
Right? We spoke about this before. What are you contributing to the process? And let other people be in contributing. And because we all within the ecosystem of our existence need to be here because we're here. We're here.
And have the value. I mean, I know Oprah she's problematic in many ways, but I remember very much one of the episodes that she talked about where she said to one of her guests, I think, she said, "You are valued simply because you are a breathing human on this earth." And
Yeah.
I had never heard anyone actually state it that way before. That was a big light bulb for me. That because I grew up I grew up in a very privileged and affluent setting and circumstance, but I suffered under incest and sexual abuse and that kind of thing from my father. And so I didn't grow up believing that I was worthy, and didn't believe that I was only worthy based on what I gave, as sick as it was, to my father. And I'm still feeling the repercussions of that now, 57 years later, in a healthy relationship where I'm experiencing unconditional love for the first time. I still don't trust it. Yay, me. I still don't trust it, though. I still don't trust it because the foundation of my existence, the people that brought me into the world that were supposed to see me as that valued human simply for being here, didn't.
Yeah.
And the undoing of that it's a lifetime experience.
So you're saying the thing from a very personal perspective, right?
Don't be upset on myself, sorry, but
no, but I'm glad that you're able to do that, because if we extrapolate to just imagine if the entire narrative takes away value on you just from because you exist and you breathe and you present in a way that's non-white.
Right. Which is the narrative that Israel has had about Palestine from the rip.
But that is the narrative that we exist under Western civilization.
Right.
In its entirety,
That seems to go hand in hand with this land grab. Getting back to what we talked about the last episode with the most recent events in Cambodia and Thailand, just trying to do a land grab, and so they're going to bomb people and poison their land and their water and everything else. It's like it seems to go hand in hand with that kind of action. It's like it's the dehumanization has to go hand in hand, because you have to be able to show that the people that you're harming and destroying and whose land you're taking isn't worth anybody's time to fight for. So that goes hand in hand. We saw it with the indigenous when Turtle Island got stolen, and we see it with any of the countries in Africa and all of the, it goes hand in hand with this process. And so
further and further separated from our understanding of humanity.
Right. And the connectivity of our humanity, the connectivity, the reconnect. And
which is why we have to continue having these conversations.
Yes.
Which is why the Give a Fuck is important for people to be doing all over the globe, having these conversations and creating this connectivity so that we can have an understanding of how people are experiencing their existence and talk about what the commonalities and what the differences are, so we can have an understanding of each other, because that is how you build relationships. That's how you build a connectivity and understanding that I want to care for you. You're my people now, because I have an understanding of how you're, even if it's not understanding that I have. I am getting you and I'm speaking to you and I'm recognizing the value that you bring and exist under. It's
Right.
very important for me. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that connectivity is so it's so important. And speaking through the a white lens, I'm constantly reminded and astounded still that I don't know how to do that connectivity piece. I have to consciously move myself through to connection. And
Ooh,
and
what does that look like? What does that mean? What is that process? I'm trying to understand.
well, I mean, I don't so what I've come to understand, and this is true for me, that because this world is geared towards and is organized, this society is organized for my comfort. Any
Mm.
space that I walk into is organized for my comfort. The only spaces that it used to be any space that was not predominantly white felt uncomfortable for me because I didn't have a lot of experience in non-predominantly white spaces. Now the script is flipped, and when I'm in predominantly white spaces, I'm more comfortable than when I'm not because of the BS, because of I'm just waiting for the white bullshit to spring up. And so, but I don't know how to like talk to my neighbors. I don't know how. And I used to blame it on because where I grew up, I was out in the middle of nowhere, it was horse farms. So there was a lot of land in between people. And we just didn't do the neighborly thing. It was all dirt roads. We didn't ride bikes. I didn't have any kids that were living anywhere near me. So I always blamed it on that. I don't know how to engage my neighbors because I didn't grow up with that as a natural, circumstance. My mom
Mhm.
never made cookies and took them over to the new neighbor and said, "Welcome to the neighborhood." Yeah, but we just didn't do that.
Can you
So
do that nowadays? That people be like, "What's in these cookies?"
I know. But so I have to consciously do it. And that starts with, for my process, that starts with me identifying my discomfort, and identifying the fact that I'm afraid to go knock on my neighbor's door and introduce myself and say, "Hi, I'm new to the neighborhood and I really wanted to get to know everybody." And if I'm aware of that anxiety, then I can do the work that I need to do to try to let it go and move myself into my discomfort anyway. And that's the tricky part, because it's easy for me I can sit back and just be happy with my little bubble. And because our entire society is set up to maintain my bubble, it
Yeah,
is my bubble, right?
very
And
much.
but I had to know that the bubble existed before I could work on popping it. And I
Yeah.
wasn't
I,
walking
I
around,
love that. Yeah, yeah, that's what. Yeah.
I was walking around with a little pin in my hand going, "I'm ready to pop my bubble." I didn't even know the bubble was there. No clue about the bubble. No
Well,
clue the bubble was
human.
even there. And even still, I struggle with that, having to learn how, and remind myself, "Oh, this looks like some bubble action here," and what can I do to dismantle it? But it is an ongoing, it's a thing that I have to consciously do all the time. And so when we talk about building community and like you were saying, trying to create systems that will support people outside of the capitalistic system, because hopefully that's falling and failing and dismantling, and
Well, it can't contain it.
we want to have something in place to support people when it fails. Well, anyway, even before it fails. And and i and I realized that's why I don't know how to do that. I have a really hard time walking into spaces.
You.
Huh?
We're doing it.
Yes,
So
we're doing it.
you're doing it in one space. I'm gonna offer that to you so that you
Right.
can,
Yeah.
right? You're
Yeah.
doing it in one space, so you do know how to do it, and it's just being able to expand your skill into other spaces. I'm just gonna offer you a flip.
Yeah, well, but I'm not to push back on what you're saying. What you just said is
No,
true. And I
mhm.
was just as an example, I just went this past weekend. I went to a screening of Where Olive Trees Weep, which is a
Okay.
movie about what's happening in Palestine. It was filmed before October 2023, which always blows my mind because it sounds like they're talking about what happened yesterday. And I walked into a space. It was put on or sponsored by the local chapter in New Haven of the DSA, which is the Democratic Socialist organization. And so seemingly the folks that are there they're my peeps, right? I mean, I'm like-minded. I don't know these folks, but I'm like-minded with them. And I still walked in, I found a seat, I sat down, I, kept my eyes down. I didn't introduce myself to people. I just, yeah. I think it's
Which
the
is why
introvert.
it's always important to have welcoming activities when people come into a space, because it also is about whoever's facilitating and creating the
Yeah,
space to
yeah,
be aware of creating an environment where people can make connections, because we're
yeah.
so being individualistic with each other. So I wouldn't attribute that just to yourself.
Hmm.
I attribute it to us being, again, in the decoloniality of ourselves
Right.
and recognizing that we are very traditional about our spaces. So I'm going to do a little plug for the Florida Restorative Justice Association's conference, because we do things very differently and very intentionally, and it takes time. It definitely takes time, but we're always in the intention of recognizing that existing under capitalism in any form of supremacy, that we do have to build an opportunity for connection and connectivity, and people to be able to engage each other in an intentional way. And if we're
Mhm.
not doing that, then we're going to miss opportunities to have and build community. And the root of the work is to build community so that people are then being able to be collective and collaborative together in reimagining the way that we want to exist.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, I'm glad that Florida Restorative Justice Center is doing that work. I'm going to pop that up onto the screen in post production. And I also want to add that I had the great pleasure of being introduced to someone who is living in Gaza, Dr. Mohammed,
Yeah.
and he has trusted me to create a fundraiser for him. He's trying to get his family out of Gaza. He and his
Mhm.
wife and his 5 children and his 2 sisters. And so in terms of connectivity, I I was so grateful to be connected to him and to learn more about him and to create this fundraiser for him so that I can help him raise that money for his family to try to get them out safely. And
At some point.
huh?
Can we move on?
He did actually ask. I told him about the podcast, and he said, he would be happy to be interviewed. So, yeah, I don't know how we would logistically. We'd have to figure all of that out because they are 7 hours ahead of East Coast time. But yeah, I would love to have him on and just offer whatever he's willing to share. He was arrested by the IOF at one point and was imprisoned for a period of time and was tortured and beaten and all of the things. Eventually was released. Thank goodness. He's a nutritionist in or was is a nutritionist, but that was his practice before all of the atrocities of the past 2 years.
Bless him. Yeah.
And it's hard because I know that he loves his homeland and he doesn't, I would imagine there's a part of him that doesn't really want to leave, but he also wants to make sure that his children are safe and his wife and his sisters, and one of his sisters has disabilities. And so, the starvation and all of that is just, they're displaced. They're in the north of Gaza right now. And so, yeah, hopefully we will be able to hear from him, but
Talking.
that all of that, just that communicating with him and trying to remember what he's coming from and imagining that maybe trust between the two of us is going to take time, which I completely get. And and he's putting a lot of trust in me to create this and manage this money for him to make sure that his family gets it so that they can get safely out of Gaza. So we're
Well,
all
bless.
connected. I guess is the point of that is we're all connected, and I'm going to add the details of the Chuffed campaign onto this in post production. So if any of you are looking for a family to support in Gaza, and there are a lot of campaigns out there, I am by no means the only one, but I would very much love anyone who feels compelled to donate to Dr. Mohammed's family to get them safely out of Gaza. I would appreciate it. So,
Yeah, that would be absolutely magnificent to be in support of that in any of the ways that you can. And
yeah.
then also inviting people in community, as we're talking about creating this connectivity. There are organizations that do have open communicative like roundtables. I know that one of my colleagues, Dan, was in Houston and on Common Ground and going to a conversation on Common Ground that they were having, and they do some great programming. There's also another organization that does these things called Awkward Dinners in South Florida, bringing people together to have conversations. They call them difficult conversations. And I don't want to call them difficult conversations because then that just puts people on edge as they're walking into a but it's a conversation that people can have in a guided and facilitated way to have a better understanding about what people are experiencing and how people are existing. And any opportunity you have to do that in community, it's really a good experience to experience. So I invite people to look for that in respective spaces.
Absolutely.
All right.
I appreciate you.
Yes, I appreciate you too. All right.
Thanks for joining us. Until next time, as you move throughout your day, continue to ask yourself,
Why do I give a fuck?
Is produced in collaboration with Johanna and Diane. Music by Norwegian musician Water. See you next time.